Bilingual Redditors, have you ever heard someone talk about you secretly in another language that didn't think you understood? Living in Germany for a few years, I could understand German. Traveling in a barn somewhere near Augsburg, little girl around the age of 5 or 6 with her mother sat opposite and pointed at me as asked why I am so black. Mother patiently explains about Afro-Americans and slavery and freedom. Girl waves me while leaving. I am Indian. PS. Thanks for the wedding gold, kind stranger. Incidentally, tomorrow is my wedding day. I worked as an English teacher in a Japanese high school. I wanted my students to use only English in class, so I never let them know I understood and spoke Japanese. For a year I overheard them talk about how long they thought my D was, whether I had a Japanese girlfriend, and so on. At the end of the school year, with all the students gathered in the gym, the principal asked me to make a farewell speech, as I was returning to my home country. So I stepped up to the mic and delivered my speech in fluent Japanese. Ever see 800 jaws drop at the same time? It was glorious. Edit. English only more than only English. So much yes. I'm a man with very long hair. One evening at Dell HQ, the Spanish only speaking janitors were behind me waiting for the elevator and one of them says, "She sure has a nice ass and beautiful hair." They turned red when I turned around to show them my long, elegant beard. I said, "Gracious," in a cute girly voice. Edit. AWW. You guys. I'm not worthy of gold. I'm just the guy from our bacon. Pics, but not what you were hoping for. Old work pic for hair shot. Shaved shot to be funny, 1.5 years ago, and a shot from the car, very recent, with beardly goodness. ASL here. You'd be surprised at how many deaf people freely talk it about everyone. It really is a different culture. I'm American. I was in Paris on the metro, and I heard these drunk American girls talking about me. I glanced at them and heard one say, "Do you think he's listening?" And her friend said, "No, we're speaking English. He probably only understands French. I don't even speak French." I am Hispanic and fluent in both English and Spanish, and people often think I don't speak Spanish. So there was this one time I was at a laundromat folding clothes, while these two Hispanic ladies are at a table across from me folding their clothes. Both of them are speaking loudly in Spanish, so I couldn't help but overhear what they were talking about. They start talking about alcohol. One of them said ever since she got married and had a kid she stopped drinking. The other chick was saying that she loved getting drunk and could not live without alcohol, that she wanted a boyfriend so he could buy her alcohol and take care of her kid. Then they both start talking about their ideal boyfriend. One of them says that she is lucky to have found her husband because he is everything she wanted in a guy. The other chick was listing off a huge checklist of her perfect guy. Hot guy. Must worship her. Buy her everything. Amazing job. Clean. Cook. Take care of kids, etc. She then is interrupted by her friend saying that she was never going to find her perfect guy with her list being so long. She then turns and looks towards me saying, "What about a guy like him?" Her friend immediately rejected that idea. She then began to make fun of my clothes, hair, glasses, everything. I'm a pretty nerdy looking dude. She says how I look like a loser who is doing nothing in life. Probably that I'm poor and won't be able to buy her things, and more. I think to myself that this chick is quite rude and loudly reply in Spanish. "I wouldn't be into a chick like yourself, because I wouldn't want a lazy drunk for a girlfriend." She got silent and just stared at me. Her friend began to laugh uncontrollably. I spent a few years in Seoul and gained near fluency after about a year of immersion. Most days on the street I'd hear something about the size of my nose or my blue eyes. Usually it was satisfying enough to look right at the speaker until they paused, then I'd just introduce myself and ask them about their day. Met a lot of cool people. In some situations it was a game. One of my Korean friends was fluent in English. We used to take the bus together and talk about whatever just to see what happened with the crowd. He spoke English and I replied in Korean. Really messed with the other passengers' heads. Good times. Once on the subway in New York, this young guy tells his friend in French, who would wear red pants. I turn to him and say, "You'd better watch out. You're not the only one that speaks French." His friend then gets extremely embarrassed and says, "I told ya so." Every day at work, I work in a manufacturing facility with many Hispanic immigrants who like to gossip constantly. They assume that, due to the fact that I am white, I have no understanding of Spanish. But what they don't know is that I went to a school system which required us to take 4 years of a language, where I reluctantly learned Spanish. For 3 years now I've been working there, listening to their gossip about me. I haven't said anything because I like being able to hear what they really think, and find it kind of amusing. At times it has been quite difficult to pretend like I can't understand, but I've managed to pull it off. I'm really looking forward to my last day when I bust out my Spanish and teach them a lesson about being judgmental and shallow. My uncle was on the other side of this. My family is Dutch, and when my aunt and uncle were living in London, she taught him the phrase in Dutch for something along the lines of, "The fat woman is rich," which they could employ easily without anyone knowing what they were talking about. At least until they went to Amsterdam and the tour guide at the Anne Frank House Museum got a bit surly, and he momentarily forgot which country he was in. TLDR. My uncle called a tour guide at the Anne Frank House a fat itch in her first language. I was at Disney World on a school trip, and there was a German father and son standing in front of us in line. They were looking around and muttering all kinds of insults. The usual fat stupid American bullet. Now, having been an exchange student in Germany for a year, I perfectly understood everything they said. So I turned to my friend and started not so subtly insulting them, making sure they could hear me. The father turned around and said to me, "You may not understand us, but we understand you." I looked him right in the eye and said with a big smile on face, "Mackenzie bitte kein Aufstand. Ja, let's not make a scene. Okay, edit, holy it. My highest rated post ever." Anyway, since a lot of you are curious about his reaction, he just kind of turned around in bewilderment, like the idea that an American could be bilingual, least of all in German, had never ever occurred to him once in his life. I heard them muttering a couple more insults, "Shelly Carroll," "Arschloch," "Idiot," but they didn't really say anything to us after that. It seemed they kind of made it a point to pretend we didn't even exist. Backpacking in China, a little girl near me asks her dad what kind of person is that. I answered in Chinese, "I'm an American." Not me, but heard from my dad, a stamp collector and an associate curator at the Carnegie Museum. They sold off the collection long ago. A group of Polish falcons wanted to see the museum's Polish collection and started trash talking, Polish of course, about how badly their country's stamps were presented. The Carnegie Museum had at that time absorbed the entire Smithsonian stamp collection. The curator, Hungarian, spoke English, French, Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, and a few other Eastern European languages. After a minute or two, he walked over to the group and kindly asked them to leave. In perfect formal Polish, the curator's parting shot was, "The last cultured Pole was Copernicus." German here. It's astonishing how many people think they're safe if they speak English. They must be aware that English is the universal business language, besides French, in a lot of countries, right? Besides that, I listen to a lot of relationship things which people probably should discuss in privacy. Haha yes. Last Saturday was a holiday for me. So I did the usual boring festivities, usually meaning going to people's houses. And one house there was this guy, typical Desi guy with a big mustache. He decided he'll make cracks about me to the other guys there in Urdu. They believed that because I always spoke in English that I couldn't speak Urdu. Called him out. He was embarrassed and apologized profusely. 10/10 would do again. Oh, I have a good one. I'm a gringo but I speak fluent Spanish. At an after hours nightclub in Miami, I took a break from dancing to go to the ladies' room. While I'm washing my hands, two Venezuelan girls come in. They look me over and the first says in Spanish, not so kindly, "Check out this white girl. She hasn't stopped dancing all morning." Her friend shrugs and says, "For a white girl, she can move." I turn around with a big grin and say to the first one in Spanish, "I can teach you my moves if you want." All three of us burst out laughing. They bought me a couple rounds and we danced together for a few hours. Fun times. I can speak Polish. By speaking Polish, you can, in varying degrees, understand Ukrainian, Czech, Slovakian, and to a small degree, Russian. I've heard a few things directed to me once or twice. On one particular occasion, 2 Ukrainian girls were talking about me on the subway, but not letting them know I understood. When I had to get off the train, I simply smiled at them and said I understood everything you two were talking about, and left. Their faces dropped. My mom speaks an obscure dialect of Chinese, although not very well since she learned English upon going to school, but she can still usually understand anyone else speaking the Cantonese dialect. One day we went to a market in Chinatown and my mom was trying to order something, but the people had a hard time understanding her because obscure dialect. At that point, the old ladies behind us started talking smack about us in Cantonese. My mom said what she got out of it was, "That lady is very Americanized. Her Chinese is terrible. And her daughter, me, is clearly half white and because of that she is ugly." We gave them the stink eye. Seattle International. Japanese girls thought a black guy could not speak Japanese. Ah, good times. I picked up a summer job at a local fast food joint this summer while on break from college. I'm a white guy from Southern California and, while not fluently bilingual, I speak a fair bit of Spanish. During my first day the rest of the workers, as I found out later, thought I was the owner's son and treated me like I was a king, which really confused me at the time. After they came to the realization I was just a normal guy at a part-time job, the chitter-chatter started and some began to complain to each other that I shouldn't be there, getting territorial as if I were intruding because I wasn't like them. One woman in particular really didn't like me. About a week into the job I overheard her saying something about me being an asshole and getting in her way. Later on that day she told me to help her with bringing something to the kitchen from the freezer downstairs because she was busy. To which I responded in Spanish, "But you called me an asshole. Why should I help you do your job?" She was taken aback and kind of stammered off, embarrassed and muttering under her breath. Felt good to confront her and watch her get all red in the face. After that happened, people didn't seem to mind me that much. Mandarin speaker. It happens all the time. The weirdest time, though, I was in a clothing store in Tokyo and a family came up and asked me a question in Japanese. I had no idea what they were saying, and then they started talking amongst themselves in Chinese about how I could possibly get by in Tokyo without understanding Japanese. Yeah, I hear ya. As a brown guy living in Japan, most people assumed I was a tourist and didn't speak Japanese. I used to overhear all kinds of weird, interesting conversations on the train. My favorite would have to be overhearing 2 Japanese schoolgirls about how hairy my legs are and wondering if it would be possible to make a carpet out of it. I didn't know if I should be flattered or offended. Gave them a wink as I walked out at my stop. Felt pretty badass. Somewhat related. I went to get some breakfast tacos and while I was in line, one female employee asked another, "Tila limpia stantes di veni?" Busted out laughing and their jaws literally dropped. She was asking, jokingly, if the other girl had washed her pussy before coming into work. I was hiking at the Grand Canyon with my friend and my brother a few years back, and there was a small group of young Japanese girls, high school age, hiking behind us. On the way down, I hear them talking about how attractive my brother is, and giggling. I find it funny, but I didn't say anything. They keep talking about him and then later my friend and chatting about who gets who, and still I say nothing. We get to a small overlook with a rock ledge sticking out that's sort of hard to access, and my daredevil brother manages to climb around the backside to get a better picture. One of the Japanese girls sees him and says she wants to go over there too, but she looks like she is going to jump to it, which seemed dangerous. So, I told her, in Japanese, that she should go to the other side to climb up. Those girls were absolutely stunned and looked beyond embarrassed. They knew I'd understood everything. I'll never forget it. I'm a high school English teacher with mostly Hispanic students, and you'd never know it by looking at me, but I also speak Spanish. I never advertise this to my classes until something like this comes up. I've caught students talking trash about other teachers, about me, trying to cheat on tests and papers, all kinds of stuff. One time that stands out was when a student warned another one not to try cheating, and she responded with "Izungurito. No sabe nada. He's a little white boy. He doesn't know anything." I looked at her and responded, "Sabes que esta gurito en chin to do lo que dices." You know, this white boy understands everything you say. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by some kid in the back going "of it," and then the whole class erupted. Yup, all the time. I don't really look Hispanic, so other people think I'm a different ethnicity and start talking about me in Spanish. It's usually older women about how my shirts are way too low cut and how my boobs are out on display. The guys just usually comment on how big they are and call me chichona, a girl with big boobs. The other side is true. As a sassy teenager, I was conversationally adept in French, and I knew all the bad words. So when some chat would cut me off while I was riding my bike, Metobacane, naturellement, they would get a torrent of French cuss words. While made me feel great, until a rather large hillbilly stopped his pickup and yelled back at me, in fluent French. I rode far and fast to get away. Yeah, this happens a bit, and it works both ways, at home and abroad. I'll give you 2 examples. 1. I was sitting at a Spanish coffee shop with my so's mentally disabled brother. Physically, you can't tell he has any issues, but in reality he's a grown man with the mind of S child. He has a habit of being clumsy, so after knocking over the table, these 2 itches started making nasty comments between themselves about him, unaware I am a native English speaker. 2. I went into a shop looking for crisps. I was delighted to find cheese and onion flavor, as normally in Spain you get Jamin. Jamin or just olive oil flavor. Anyway, when I went to pay I spoke in Spanish with the cashier. He looked at me in surprise and said he only keeps weird flavors like that in stock for foreigners. I hear this a lot in Germany from English speakers. They talk amongst themselves assuming English is their secret language, then turn around to ask people something in English, assuming to be understood. What's the thought process there? The best were 2 German girls though. I was with a Scottish friend, sitting down opposite to them in the subway. They immediately switched their conversation, sexual topics, to atrocious English. It got cringe-worthy really fast, so we missed the chance to let them know that we understood. To avoid embarrassing them, we kept quiet till they got off the subway, just raising the occasional eyebrow. Yeah, Dart actually busted employees for policy violations that way too. Mexican here. I was on a bus stop once and there were a couple of white Mormons next to me. For what I heard, the tallest one was starting out and was nervous about talking to strangers about religion. The other guy wanted to give him confidence and told him, "Look, he seems dumb. Why don't you practice with him?" or something like that. Then Elder Tall approached me and asked me if I wanted to hear about Nuestro Señor y Salvador Jesucristo. I immediately answered, in English, "I am sorry, but I believe you might want to execute your learning with a more short-minded individual." Elder Short went pale as a sheet, and when the bus arrived, the only 3 seats were together. That was an awkward trip. For them, I mean. My husband and I, he speaks French and I speak Spanish, we both speak English, were vacationing in France, and while visiting this castle town some years back, stopped for lunch. The waiter thought we were Americans and decided to call me a whore in French when we complained we had been waiting for 1.5 hours for our food to come out, and said we were going to leave and to please give us the check for what we had consumed. I think the waiter was fired that same day when my husband gave the restaurant manager a piece of his mind, in French. 6 feet 2. Pale white skin. Blue-eyed American here. I'm a dude despite the username. I speak Spanish nearly fluently, lived abroad, majored in Spanish, have taught it in the past. There used to be this bar downtown I would go to, that on a certain night of the week, would kind of get overtaken by gay men. I'm not gay, but I don't give a shit. I just wanted a good drink and kind of realized that as the night went on, more and more gay men were showing up. No big deal. So, I go to the restroom of the bar and there's one other guy in there. He sees me, and I'm sure at that point figures I don't speak Spanish. He gets on his phone, and basically starts telling his friend how many good looking men there are, and how if he comes out with him, he'll certainly get a piece of ass, etc. I chuckle to myself and figure I won't say anything. He keeps going, but then I notice that he's given the wrong name of the bar, and poor directions. So I turn to him as I'm washing my hands and tell him in perfect Spanish the name directions. Blank stare. Gracious. Sort of. I worked for the world HQ of a company, and we were imposing a project on the affiliate in the Netherlands. There were a bunch of English speaking, mostly US, UK, and Canada, HQ people working with an equal number of Dutch people who really didn't want us there. It's easy to pick up basic words, especially names, when you keep hearing them. Someone peeked into the room I was in and asked, in Dutch, where to find someone. I didn't even notice it was Dutch. I just answered in English and he left. The two Dutch women in the room looked at me horrified, and one stammered and asked how much Dutch I'd picked up, without missing a beat. The other English speaker in the room replied in a warning tone, much more than you realize. Of course, we never had any idea what they were saying when they were talking about us. But those ladies were really nice to us for the next week, and a lot of people quit speaking Dutch around us after that. Nope, but once I was talking over the phone with a managing director of my company and they didn't know that I could understand some German and he started talking about some secret event that was going to take place in German. I just typed in Google Translate as they spoke and found out about the whole story. I'm bilingual, English and French. I was in the hospital recovering from surgery, high as duck on morphine, when shift change occurred. The two nurses were talking in French, one briefing the other on the 4 patients in the room, who had all been speaking English with their visitors. The briefing included color commentary about our personalities, some of it being relevant to our medical status. For example, woman in bed 2 hasn't gone to the bathroom yet on her own. Used a commode because she's being a big baby. Man in bed 3 has problems hitting the bowl and that it might be better to have a catheter put back and than to have housekeeping come back every hour. And that he's an asshole for thinking it's funny. When they got to me, nurse 1 said that I was high as duck and hilarious. And that nurse 2 would enjoy any conversations I had with my dad if he came back. I sat up, said thank you. My dad thinks I'm funny too in French and laid back down. They both stood awkwardly, and then said you'll be discreet. I nodded and said for more pudding. More pudding arrived. All the time. I speak Spanish fluently but look white so people think I don't speak Spanish. I was walking with my ex-girlfriend at the boardwalk when a group of Central American guys decided to start talking about screwing her and talking it about me when I turned around and told them to duck off in Spanish. I've never seen people become the awkward seal meme so quickly. Oh, I hope I'm not late to the party. I'm a Hebrew English speaker and I was in Israel out at a bar with some friends and we decided to mess around with some people. Guys would come over to us and we would pretend we could only speak English and they would tell us the most ridiculous things like, oh, we are soldiers, we have fought in the fields. And they would whisper to their friends in Hebrew that they were just office secretaries or whatever, and it all finally came to a halt when some guy said to his friend in Hebrew, dude, if you're not ducking her tonight then I will. So I responded in Hebrew, excuse me? And they all just about fell over with embarrassment. I speak more than 3 languages. So often after even my close friends know a few of the languages I speak, they grow complacent around me. Little do they know, I speak English, Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, Punjabi, Spanish, Russian and Bengali. One time, I was sitting with my Kazakh friend and my German-Russian friend. We were eating parathas at my house and chilling and playing Call of Duty. Bastards started detailing their plans to steal my ice cream from the fridge and divide it up, in Russian. So I sneaked ice cream into the conversation and told them there was no ice cream left. Then I walked out 10 minutes later with a full bowl and told them I spoke Russian as well. Their faces. Not bilingual but I know Russian. And it's not a common thing at all here in Malta. A few years ago I was working in retail and I had a Russian mother and daughter duo at my till. While I was scanning their stuff, the mother turned to the daughter and told her something along the lines of, look at this girl. She is so fat. When they paid I gave them a huge smile and told them spasiba. Thank you. They looked absolutely stunned. It was brilliant. Cafe in Versailles. I was with my mum and she accidentally knocked a woman's bag off the back of her chair. She turned and said sorry and the rude lady called my mum a stupid English itch in French. I went mental at her in French and her face afterwards was a picture. Mum asked me what I said but I daren't say it back to her. Jep, I'm German, but my father is Dutch, so I can speak that as well. Had some interesting encounters, where some Dutch tried to insult me, The best worst was when I was shopping and two girls behind me talked about me, where one was stating that she fancies me and that she would like to do things with me. I turned around with a nice smile, just to discover that these girls were about 14-15. I was about 29. Didn't told them that I could understand them,